The weight of invisible expectations is one of the most subtle yet relentless pressures a person can face, a force that exists not in physical form, but in the quiet demands and assumptions of society, family, peers, and even oneself. These expectations are invisible because they are often unspoken. They are communicated through body language, social norms, cultural narratives, and the internalized beliefs that individuals carry about what they should be, what they should achieve, and how they should behave. Unlike tangible burdens, these invisible expectations are persistent, shaping choices and decisions in ways that are hard to measure or resist. Yet they leave a profound mark on the psyche. From the earliest stages of life, people are conditioned to conform to certain ideals, whether it is excelling academically, pursuing a respectable career, maintaining certain appearances, or fulfilling social roles that are expected of them. These pressures often carry an implicit message. Success, happiness, or acceptance is conditional on meeting these standards. The invisible nature of these expectations makes them particularly insidious because they operate silently, often without the individual fully recognizing their influence. Yet the consequences are tangible in feelings of inadequacy, stress, and guilt. Every decision, from small daily choices to major life paths, can become entangled with the desire to satisfy these unseen mandates. The individual may feel compelled to live up to a version of themselves that is constructed by others' perceptions rather than by their own authentic desires. This conflict between personal inclination and external expectation can lead to an ongoing tension, a silent internal dialogue where one constantly evaluates their worth against the standards imposed by invisible forces. Emotional labor becomes a daily necessity as individuals suppress their true feelings, ambitions, or quirks in favor of what is socially acceptable or expected. The cost of this labor is often internalized anxiety, low self-esteem, and the perpetual feeling of walking a tightrope. Invisible expectations are also culturally and socially mediated. What is considered acceptable or honorable in one context may differ dramatically in another. Yet the pressure to conform is universal. Families may transmit their own generational expectations, reflecting values and aspirations that may not align with the current realities or desires of younger generations. Societal narratives, often perpetuated through media and education, reinforce idealized images of success, beauty, and morality, creating benchmarks that are largely unattainable yet relentlessly pursued. Friends, colleagues, and communities contribute additional layers, as peer pressure and social comparison intensify the sense of obligation to meet certain norms. The individual internalizes these pressures, creating a self-monitoring system that scrutinizes behavior and decisions for adherence to invisible standards. Psychological research has shown that chronic exposure to such expectations can have profound mental health consequences. Feelings of inadequacy and self-doubt often arise when individuals perceive a gap between their own reality and the expectations imposed upon them. Depression, anxiety, and burnout are common manifestations of living under constant unseen scrutiny. Even accomplishments may be tainted by a sense of insufficiency because the individual continues to measure themselves against these external benchmarks rather than their own intrinsic standards. Paradoxically, the invisible weight of expectations can also foster resilience and drive, pushing individuals to achieve beyond what they might have done without such pressures. The problem arises when the motivation stems less from genuine aspiration and more from fear of judgment or failure in the eyes of others. In such cases, achievements may feel hollow, personal satisfaction may remain elusive, and life may be experienced as a continuous performance. The invisible nature of these expectations also complicates communication and relationships. Those carrying the weight may struggle to articulate their struggles, fearing that acknowledging the pressure might disappoint others or be interpreted as weakness. This silence reinforces the invisibility of the expectations, perpetuating the cycle of stress and self-repression. Moreover, when multiple layers of expectation converge cultural, familial, professional, and personal. The cumulative effect can become overwhelming, leading individuals to experience a sense of entrapment, as if their lives are scripted by forces beyond their control. Breaking free from the weight of invisible expectations requires conscious awareness and reflection. Recognizing that much of the pressure is socially constructed and not inherently necessary for personal fulfillment is a critical first step. Individuals must examine which expectations truly align with their values and desires, and which are imposed externally, often without explicit consent. The process often involves renegotiating relationships, redefining success on personal terms, and developing the courage to prioritize intrinsic goals over external approval. This does not imply rejecting all societal norms or familial advice, but rather discerning between supportive guidance and undue burden. Mindfulness, therapy, and self-compassion are tools that can aid in managing the psychological strain of invisible expectations, helping individuals to differentiate between what is expected and what is authentic. Ultimately, the weight of invisible expectations is a universal human experience, shaping behavior, emotions, and identity in profound ways. While they can drive growth and achievement, they can also stifle individuality and obscure genuine happiness. Living under this invisible weight is a delicate balance between honoring social bonds and nurturing personal authenticity. Learning to navigate, negotiate, and sometimes release these expectations is an ongoing journey that requires courage, self-awareness, and a willingness to embrace vulnerability. Only by acknowledging the existence and impact of these unseen pressures can individuals begin to reclaim autonomy over their lives and cultivate a sense of freedom, purpose, and fulfillment that is truly their own. Breaking free from a controlling household is a profound and often painful journey, one that challenges both the mind and the heart. A controlling household is not always defined by overt abuse. Sometimes it manifests subtly, through manipulation, rigid rules, excessive monitoring, or constant judgment. In such an environment, the sense of self is frequently overshadowed by the expectations, fears, and dictates of others. Children or young adults growing up under these conditions often learn early to suppress their own desires, opinions, and emotions in order to avoid conflict or disappointment. They become highly attuned to the moods and expectations of their caregivers, developing a hyper-awareness of what is permissible and what is not. Decision-making, a process most people take for granted, becomes fraught with anxiety because each choice may be scrutinized, criticized, or invalidated. Over time, this pattern can erode confidence, foster dependence, and create a persistent fear of autonomy. The first step toward breaking free is often an internal awakening, a realization that the control exerted by the household is limiting personal growth and well-being. This recognition can be both liberating and terrifying, as it may come with guilt or fear of retaliation. Many who attempt to assert independence are met with emotional pressure, manipulation, or guilt-tripping, designed to maintain the household's authority and preserve the status quo. The individual must navigate a complex emotional landscape, balancing the desire for freedom with the fear of losing familial bonds or incurring the wrath of those who seek to control. Psychological research suggests that growing up in a controlling environment can have long-lasting effects, including anxiety, depression, and difficulties in forming healthy relationships. One's sense of identity may be blurred or underdeveloped, making it difficult to recognize personal values and desires separate from the household's expectations. Breaking free, therefore, requires not only physical or geographical separation, but also mental and emotional work. Developing self-awareness is critical. This involves understanding which beliefs and fears are genuinely one's own and which have been imposed by controlling family dynamics. It may require unlearning patterns of thought and behavior that have been reinforced over years, such as self-blame, people-pleasing, or over-accommodation. Support systems outside the household, such as trusted friends, mentors, or therapists, often play a crucial role in this process, offering validation, guidance, and perspective that the controlling household cannot provide. Financial independence can also be a significant factor. In many households, control is maintained not just through emotional manipulation, but through economic dependence. Securing one's own income, managing personal finances, and creating practical plans for living independently are essential steps that allow the individual to act on their desire for freedom without immediate fear of hardship. The process of leaving a controlling household is rarely linear. Even after physical separation, lingering feelings of guilt, fear, or obligation can persist. Emotional ties, especially with parents or siblings, can be deeply ingrained, and the mind may oscillate between relief at independence and anxiety about severing connections. Healing, therefore, involves ongoing self-reflection, boundary setting, and sometimes therapy to process years of internalized control and to build resilience against potential attempts at continued manipulation from afar. Communication skills are also vital. Those who break free often find that asserting their boundaries clearly, calmly, and consistently is necessary to maintain autonomy. This can be particularly challenging if the household is accustomed to unquestioned obedience, but it is an essential aspect of protecting oneself while fostering healthier, more balanced relationships in the future. Another aspect of breaking free is cultivating a sense of identity that is separate from the controlling environment. This may involve exploring personal interests, making independent choices, and embracing the freedom to succeed or fail on one's own terms. It requires trusting one's judgment, taking responsibility for one's actions, and learning to navigate life without constant approval or validation from the household. Importantly, breaking free does not necessarily mean cutting off all familial ties, though in some cases it may be the healthiest choice. For many, it is about redefining relationships on terms that allow mutual respect, recognizing that control and love are not synonymous. Establishing these new dynamics can be challenging, requiring patience, persistence, and often repeated negotiations of boundaries. The journey is rarely easy, and setbacks are common. Moments of doubt, guilt, or longing for approval may arise, but these experiences are part of the process of reclaiming autonomy. Over time, as independence is asserted and personal identity is strengthened, individuals often experience profound growth, a sense of liberation, and the ability to cultivate relationships and opportunities that are authentic and self-directed. Breaking free from a controlling household is ultimately an act of courage. It is a declaration that one's life belongs first and foremost to oneself, that personal dignity and autonomy are not negotiable, and that the right to pursue happiness and fulfillment supersedes the demands of those who would constrain it. The path involves emotional resilience, strategic planning, and self-compassion, and it is marked by both challenges and triumphs. Those who navigate this journey often emerge with a clearer understanding of their values, a strengthened sense of self, and a capacity to engage with the world on their own terms, unburdened by the invisible chains of control that once dictated their every move. Learning boundaries and self-respect is a journey that shapes the way individuals relate to themselves and the world around them. It begins with a recognition that personal space, needs, and feelings are valid and deserve protection, even in the face of external pressures. Many people grow up in environments where boundaries are unclear, ignored, or outright violated, leading to confusion about what is acceptable behavior from others and what is not. In such circumstances, individuals may internalize the idea that their worth is contingent on pleasing others, sacrificing their comfort, or tolerating disrespect. This early conditioning can create patterns of over-accommodation, self-neglect, and difficulty asserting one's own needs. Learning boundaries is essentially the process of unlearning these ingrained behaviors, understanding that saying, "No," is not selfish, and that protecting one's time, energy, and emotional well-being is a fundamental aspect of self-respect. It requires reflection and self-awareness to identify where one's limits lie, which situations are harmful or draining, and which relationships are imbalanced. Setting boundaries is not simply about creating walls. It is about defining the space in which one can exist authentically and safely, where personal integrity is maintained and emotional needs are met. Self-respect and boundaries are intertwined because the ability to enforce limits communicates to oneself and others that one's values and dignity matter. When individuals consistently honor their own boundaries, they reinforce the belief that their feelings and needs are legitimate, which in turn strengthens self-esteem. Conversely, repeatedly ignoring one's limits can lead to resentment, emotional exhaustion, and a gradual erosion of self-worth. Learning these skills often begins with small, conscious choices. It may involve saying no to requests that feel overbearing, speaking up when someone's behavior is hurtful, or refusing to tolerate gossip, manipulation, or other forms of disrespect. These actions, though seemingly minor, gradually build confidence and reinforce the principle that one's life is not meant to be dictated by others' whims or expectations. Emotional intelligence plays a critical role in this process. Understanding one's feelings, recognizing the emotional patterns of others, and navigating interactions without guilt or aggression are all essential for healthy boundary setting. It requires courage to stand firm, particularly in relationships where control, dependency, or past patterns of manipulation exist. In such cases, the exercise of boundaries may initially provoke resistance, conflict, or emotional backlash from others accustomed to unchallenged influence. Yet, enduring these challenges and maintaining consistency is a vital part of reinforcing self-respect. Cultural and societal norms also influence how individuals perceive boundaries. In some cultures, prioritizing personal needs may be seen as selfish, while in others, assertiveness and independence are encouraged. Learning boundaries thus involves negotiating between external expectations and internal values. Understanding that respect for oneself is not contingent upon conforming to societal pressures or fulfilling others' demands at the expense of personal well-being. Another important aspect of learning boundaries is self-reflection and self-compassion. Individuals must recognize their own patterns of compromise or overextension without judgment, and approach the process as one of growth rather than criticism. This internal kindness allows for mistakes and adjustments, acknowledging that boundary setting is a skill honed over time and through experience. Relationships are profoundly affected by the practice of healthy boundaries. When individuals communicate their limits clearly and respectfully, they foster mutual understanding and respect. Such boundaries prevent exploitation, reduce misunderstandings, and promote interactions that are balanced and supportive. People who learn to uphold their boundaries often find that relationships improve in quality, as others are compelled to engage in a manner that honors mutual dignity rather than dominance or control. Conversely, failing to establish boundaries can perpetuate cycles of disappointment, resentment, and interpersonal stress, where one's needs are consistently ignored or minimized. Learning self-respect is not limited to external interactions. It is equally about internal attitudes. Valuing oneself means recognizing one's achievements, acknowledging strengths and weaknesses without harsh self-criticism, and refusing to internalize negative judgments that undermine confidence. Self-respect involves treating oneself with the same kindness and consideration one would offer to a loved one, understanding that personal worth is inherent and not dependent on external validation. Over time, the integration of boundaries and self-respect transforms one's approach to life. Decisions become guided not solely by the desire to please others, but by alignment with personal values and well-being. One develops the ability to navigate complex social dynamics without losing a sense of identity, to refuse toxic situations without guilt, and to engage with the world from a position of integrity rather than fear. Challenges will inevitably arise, as boundaries may be tested and self-respect may be questioned, but each experience strengthens resilience, clarity, and self-confidence. Ultimately, learning boundaries and self-respect is an ongoing journey, one that requires honesty, courage, and consistent practice. It is a declaration that one's life, emotions, and values matter, and that personal dignity is not negotiable. By cultivating these skills, individuals not only protect themselves from harm and exploitation, but also lay the foundation for meaningful relationships, emotional well-being, and a life lived authentically. The process empowers individuals to stand firm in the face of pressure, make choices aligned with their true selves, and approach life with a sense of balance, self-awareness, and confidence that is both liberating and transformative. Finding stability and trust in new relationships is a journey that often requires patience, self-awareness, and emotional courage. Entering a new relationship, whether romantic, platonic, or professional, can be both exciting and daunting because it involves opening oneself to another person while navigating uncertainties, vulnerabilities, and past experiences. Stability in a relationship is not merely about predictability or routine. It is about cultivating an environment where both individuals feel secure, respected, and supported. Trust, likewise, is not automatic. It is earned over time through consistent behavior, honesty, and mutual understanding. The foundation of stability begins with self-awareness. Individuals must understand their own needs, boundaries, and patterns of behavior before expecting a relationship to provide security. Past experiences, especially those marked by betrayal, neglect, or emotional turbulence, can influence one's capacity to trust. Being aware of these tendencies allows one to approach new relationships with clarity and intentionality, rather than projecting unresolved fears onto a new partner or friend. Without this self-awareness, patterns of insecurity, jealousy, or overdependence may emerge, undermining the very stability one seeks. Trust develops gradually through repeated interactions that demonstrate reliability, transparency, and integrity. Early stages of a relationship are often filled with uncertainty, and it is natural to feel cautious. However, it is important to differentiate between healthy caution and automatic suspicion. Healthy trust involves observing consistent behavior over time, listening to words as well as actions, and assessing whether intentions align with demonstrated behavior. It also requires vulnerability, because trust cannot exist in isolation. Opening oneself emotionally is necessary for meaningful connection. Stability and trust are intertwined because consistent, predictable actions foster a sense of safety, which in turn encourages openness and honesty. In new relationships, both parties may consciously or unconsciously test each other's reliability, boundaries, and emotional responses. These early dynamics are critical, as they set patterns for future interactions. Establishing clear communication from the outset is essential. Expressing expectations, discussing boundaries, and sharing personal values helps create transparency and reduces the likelihood of misunderstandings that could destabilize the relationship. Open dialogue about feelings, experiences, and concerns cultivates empathy and strengthens emotional bonds, which are necessary for building trust. At the same time, patience is crucial. Stability cannot be forced or rushed. It grows as individuals learn about each other's personalities, coping mechanisms, and emotional rhythms. Rushing intimacy or expecting immediate trust can backfire, leading to disappointment or conflict. Allowing the relationship to evolve naturally, while observing patterns of behavior and consistency, ensures that the foundation being built is solid and sustainable. Past experiences also shape how one approaches trust. Individuals who have been hurt or deceived in previous relationships may struggle with suspicion, fear of abandonment, or emotional woes. Acknowledging these past experiences without letting them dictate the present is key. It is important to distinguish between patterns that are genuinely threatening and those that are projections of previous trauma. Learning to trust again often requires forgiveness, self-compassion, and an understanding that new individuals are not responsible for past betrayals. Mutual respect is a cornerstone of stability. Both parties must value each other's emotions, opinions, and boundaries. When respect is present, individuals feel heard and validated, which strengthens emotional safety. Conversely, disrespect or disregard for boundaries erodes trust quickly and can create cycles of insecurity and conflict. Developing emotional resilience is also essential. New relationships inevitably face challenges, disagreements, and moments of doubt. Resilience allows individuals to navigate these obstacles without collapsing into fear or defensiveness. Recognizing that conflict is a natural part of any human connection helps maintain perspective, preventing minor misunderstandings from destabilizing the relationship. Stability and trust also involve observing actions over words. While promises and declarations are meaningful, consistent follow-through is what solidifies trust. Reliability in everyday actions, from keeping commitments to responding with honesty, demonstrates integrity and fosters a sense of security that words alone cannot create. Over time, these patterns of consistency build an environment where both parties can flourish emotionally, knowing that their vulnerability will not be exploited. The process of finding stability and trust in new relationships is not one-sided. It requires mutual effort. Both individuals must be willing to communicate openly, respect boundaries, and demonstrate reliability. Reciprocity strengthens the relationship, as both partners feel valued and secure, reducing fear of abandonment or betrayal. In addition, cultivating self-reliance and emotional independence outside the relationship supports stability. When individuals are grounded in their own sense of worth, they are less likely to cling desperately or create dependency, which can destabilize even a promising connection. Ultimately, finding stability and trust in new relationships is a gradual, intentional process that balances vulnerability with discernment, patience with observation, and hope with realism. It is about creating a safe emotional environment where both parties feel secure to express themselves authentically, take risks, and build intimacy without fear of betrayal or neglect. The journey requires self-awareness, clear communication, mutual respect, and consistent action. But the rewards are profound. A connection rooted in trust, emotional safety, and a sense of shared stability that allows the relationship to grow, evolve, and endure over time. Choosing peace over forgiveness is a profound and often misunderstood path, one that challenges conventional ideas about healing, morality, and personal growth. While forgiveness is frequently celebrated as the ultimate response to hurt or betrayal, it is not always possible or even necessary for reclaiming one's sense of well-being. Forgiveness implies a willingness to release resentment towards someone who has caused harm, but it also carries the weight of reconciliation, understanding, or at least an emotional alignment with the offender. Choosing peace over forgiveness, on the other hand, is an act of self-preservation and inner clarity. It prioritizes personal calm, emotional freedom, and the protection of one's mental and spiritual space above any obligation to absolve another. This choice does not require condoning wrongdoing, forgetting pain, or maintaining a relationship with the person who caused harm. Instead, it focuses on reclaiming control over one's own emotions and refusing to allow past injuries to dictate the present. Many people struggle with this concept because societal and cultural narratives often frame forgiveness as a moral duty, particularly in religious or social contexts. Individuals are told that to forgive is to demonstrate strength, love, or moral superiority, and failure to forgive may be interpreted as weakness, bitterness, or a failure of character. These pressures can create internal conflict, leaving a person feeling guilty for holding on to resentment, even when that resentment is a natural response to injustice. Choosing peace over forgiveness is an intentional act of reframing this dynamic. It acknowledges that while holding on to anger, hurt, or frustration can feel morally justified, it is emotionally and physically taxing. Chronic resentment can manifest as stress, anxiety, depression, and even physical health problems, quietly eroding one's quality of life. Prioritizing peace means letting go of the mental rehearsal of hurt, the obsessive focus on what was done wrong, and the persistent longing for acknowledgement or apology. It is a deliberate turning away from the energy drain of unresolved pain and toward emotional autonomy. Achieving peace without forgiveness requires cultivating self-awareness and self-compassion. One must honestly assess their feelings, acknowledging the depth of the hurt without judgment, while understanding that their emotional state is their responsibility. This is not about suppressing emotions, but about observing them with clarity, recognizing their impermanence, and deciding consciously not to allow them to control one's life. Boundaries often accompany this choice. Choosing peace may involve creating distance from those who have caused harm, whether through reduced contact, clearly defined limits, or complete disengagement. These boundaries are not punitive but protective, ensuring that one's commitment to inner tranquility is not compromised by repeated exposure to toxic or harmful behavior. It is important to note that choosing peace over forgiveness is not a passive or indifferent stance. It requires active mental work, releasing the need for validation, reframing the narrative of the past, and cultivating practices that foster calm, such as meditation, journaling, or meaningful engagement with supportive communities. It is about shifting focus from what cannot be changed the actions of others to what can be nurtured, one's own sense of stability, happiness, and emotional equilibrium. This approach also allows individuals to embrace complexity in human relationships. People are fallible, and harm is often inflicted through ignorance, weakness, or circumstance, rather than deliberate malice. Recognizing this does not obligate one to forgive, but can soften the intensity of anger and make the pursuit of peace more attainable. Choosing peace is ultimately an act of self-liberation. It detaches one's sense of well-being from the behavior of others and reasserts personal agency. While forgiveness may sometimes follow naturally from this process, it is not a prerequisite. One can remain guarded, assertive, and protective of oneself while simultaneously cultivating serenity. In doing so, individuals often discover that peace brings clarity, emotional resilience, and the ability to engage with life more fully. It allows one to move forward without being tethered to past wrongs or lingering resentment, and it opens space for authentic joy, connection, and growth that are not contingent on the actions or recognition of those who have caused pain. Choosing peace over forgiveness is a nuanced, courageous, and deeply personal decision. It challenges societal expectations, honors one's own emotional needs, and reframes healing as an internal process rather than a relational obligation. It affirms that well-being is not contingent upon the absolution of others, but is rooted in one's ability to release anger, reclaim autonomy, and cultivate tranquility. By prioritizing peace, individuals reclaim their emotional power, free themselves from the shadows of past harm, and create the conditions for a life defined not by resentment or expectation, but by clarity, resilience, and enduring calm. It is a choice that requires honesty, courage, and discipline, yet its reward is profound: the restoration of inner harmony and the ability to engage with the world unburdened by the weight of past grievances.